Hey, welcome to Third Man in the Ring. It's hosted by Ref Popeye Ray. So please get on YouTube, subscribe, push that subscribe button. Today, I have a great guest. If all you boxing MMA fans are asking, hey, who calls the shots? Who's the boss? Or in my world, who's the chingon? Who's the mero? The main guy? Well, today we're gonna interview him. My boss, Andy Foster. Please, Mr. Foster. How you doing, Andy?
Hey, Ray. Good to see you.
Doing?
Thank
Sit down,
you.
please. Yeah. So, Andy, how you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks. Good.
Yeah.
So, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you grew up. You know, how'd you come about?
Yeah. So I was in Georgia. You know, and as a kid who gets out of high school, and I don't know, I didn't want to go to college right away.
No.
No, I didn't. I was anti-college there for a little while. Had a little bit of anger problems, I think, when I was younger.
That explains all the knockouts you had in your MMA and boxing.
But you needed something.
Yeah.
You know, I needed something. And so I discovered jiu-jitsu, and I'd already been practicing in 96 when I was still in high school with my friend Derek, who's now an MMA judge. But I started with Jacare Cavalcanti, the founder of Alliance Jiu-Jitsu. I went to Atlanta, and I trained with him for a long time, and you know, I got better at jiu-jitsu because at that time jiu-jitsu was just for fighting, and I decided I wanted to start promoting fights, and I promoted.
So it wasn't actually in the sport game yet? The jiu-jitsu? I mean, they weren't having a competition as much as they had it now?
No, it was for fighting at that time.
That's it, huh?
Yeah, it was for. I mean, this was late '90s, so they had a very few grappling tournaments, but it was not for that. It was for fighting, and back then it was called no holds barred, the fighting, as opposed to MMA. But so we started promoting shows, and I promoted a show, and then I promoted another show, and in the promotion of the other show, I met my future wife promoting that show. But as that went along, but then, Ray, what happened was, and I was training this whole time. I mean, I was training myself this whole time, and I was getting ready to fight myself. And then the late Senator John McCain made some comments. He called MMA, or no holds barred fighting, human cockfighting. That was the thing.
And he was really against it in New York as well, wasn't he?
I think he was against it across the country.
Across the country, huh?
You know, I'm sitting here in Georgia, and the Georgia legislature banned no holds barred fighting during that time. And that was maybe in 2002, I'm thinking. So, you got to understand the time frame. It's a little different now that we've seen the UFC blow up, but at the time frame, I think that this is done. I think it's over. I think it's all done. So I just start boxing because I think that's all we have left. I mean, boxing, and so I box, and I start promoting boxing shows with the Georgia Commission, and I'm promoting boxing, but at the same time I'm doing it myself, and I'm getting in the amateur stuff. And then there was an idea, it might have been Mike Carlson in Georgia. There was a few of them that got together and decided, and they asked me to help them, and I did. And we all worked together and lobbied a bill that brought mixed martial arts back under a regulated sanctioning organization, under sanctioning body. And that's how I got to know the late Steve Fossum.
So was there a commissioner then?
There was, but the commissioner only did boxing at that time.
Oh, okay.
So this was basically this bill gave self-regulation under a sanctioning body premise, under a premise. And so that went on, and I fought a lot under that scheme. From 2003 until 2006, something like that. And then in 2006, might have been the end of 2005, the Georgia Commission decides that they're going to actually directly regulate mixed martial arts. They're going to.
Did they give in because of maybe the fans? They seen how it was generating?
Yeah, I think so.
Huh.
Okay, I think so. I don't want to speculate, but I think that they saw this as getting bigger.
Yes.
And also potentially this is getting more dangerous, so we probably need to step in. And the man there, his name was Kelly Farr, who was very much liked him because he brought me on as the head referee, and I was the referee while I was still training, still doing all the stuff myself. I was competing and still doing all this stuff, but I was the head referee for the Georgia Commission for those years because I knew that was going to happen. Like, you're not going to, once a state agency decides, you don't try to block it. It's going to happen. So I did that for a couple years, and then Mr. Farr got promoted, and he said, "Hey, I want to recommend you to the Secretary of State for that job." And I laughed. I was like, "I'm not going to do that job. I've got a fight coming up in Montreal. I'm going to do that, you know." But eventually I decided, hey, I'm going to try it. I did it. And I was appointed in Georgia in 2008 by the Secretary of State. And the first 6 months, I didn't really like the job. Like, it was hard, like drinking out of a fire hydrant. But then I figured it out. I figured out the way the state works. And so I did that job till 2012. And then the California job came open.
Oh, okay.
And now this is a job I really wanted. I tried real hard to get this job. I tried hard.
I heard you went through a few interviews. Huh?
Oh, so many interviews. So many interviews. I had to have a first interview just to get the interview. And then I had to have an interview with the full commission. I thought mine went well because the interview for everybody else, they moved me to last. Like, I was supposed to be third, they moved me to last. There might have been 6 interviews that day. And I could tell how long they were going because you could see, you'd sit out there and watch everybody else come in. And so there was like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Mine went like an hour and a half. Like, it was over an hour. And, you know, one of the questions that I got from the commissioners, you know, they kept asking me different questions about what I would do. And
scenarios? Is that?
Yeah, but like, what would I do if I got the job? And I had developed a plan for this job in colored copy, like a pretty laid out 40, 50 page plan of what I would do in the first 90 days. And I gave it to all of them. And I was told later that's what got me the job. I'm not sure, but and I said, listen, after 90 days, I'm an exempt employee. If I've not done it, just let me go. I'll go back to Georgia. You know,
that was cut and dry, no?
Yeah, but I was working real hard them 90 days to make sure I had secured employment. You know, and then but I left Georgia. I never had been to Sacramento. Never had been. I'd been to L.A., but not Sacramento. I left Atlanta. I turned in my badge for the November, I think it was November the 6th. I don't tell you wrong, but something like that. I turned in my badge on November 6th, and I was sworn in California on November 7th after I got off the airplane. And so yeah, that's and then that's my road here. And then didn't have a house, so I had to buy a house like quickly.
Yeah.
Because didn't know.
Were you married yet?
I was married, and Sonia was at home. She was back in Georgia because I came out because we didn't know, it happened pretty quickly. So I had to be out here, and then I went back at Christmas, and we got her, and we drove. Me and her. We didn't have kids yet. Me and her and our 4 dogs and our parrot drove. I don't know, 2,600 miles from Atlanta
that's a little drive
to Sacramento. Yeah.
So, Mr. Foster, I have some questions here, if you don't mind answering.
Sure, yeah.
Know? How many competitive sports events does California regulate a year in California? Okay, so that's a really good question. COVID really took a number on the California numbers. And at the same time, Florida was able to get some of the promotions that ordinarily ran in California went to Florida. And we're getting some of those back. Some of them stayed in Florida, which is okay. They were based there. But California does not, and I see no way
that we're going to ever regulate bare knuckle boxing. I'm diametrically opposed to bare knuckle boxing. I don't want to do it. I think it's a lot of reasons why. And some states are doing that. But I think last year the commission did around 130 professional events, something like that. And that's down from about 160 pre-COVID. Like, so we're building back. Yeah. But it's not, you know.
So is it true that California pretty much does the most?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
100%,
absolutely. Yeah.
And it seems like we're always working, all of us, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
What are the biggest challenges that face regulating combative sports in California? Pretty much, what headaches do you go through? You know? And I know your phone's always blowing up. There's always something here with Wade or this fighter wants to fight that fighter or this promoter. I can only imagine. But what is one of your biggest headaches? You know what? This is from a fan, but I shouldn't say headaches because obviously you love your job. You do a great job at it, but the struggles, I guess, you know?
Yeah, one of the biggest struggles that I have is weighing competing interest. And by that, I'm not going to say the fighter, but recently I was dealing with a situation where a fighter had some issues getting a license. Okay. And you have to weigh his ability and his right to earn versus his health and versus what's good for the public and what's good for the state. And it's like and this one was not an easy one. Sometimes they're easy and you can just say, no, you can't get a license.
You kind of have to juggle all that. And
Another issue that I deal with is sometimes you have competing interest with because I have 169 officials. Okay? You're an official, but it's 169 different folks across the spectrums. And, finding the right person to do the right fight is not exactly an art form, but it takes some experience to figure that out. And sometimes styles make fights with the fighters themselves, but you've got to have the right referee. Not so much the judges. The judges are going to judge what they judge. Okay, see, that's not really. But referees all have styles to them. They absolutely have a style to the way that they officiate. And, when it's mixed martial arts, if I can use Herb Dean on every fight, he's got every fight in California. Yeah. Every fight. Before John retired, it was John McCarthy. Mm-hmm. Okay, if John, it's
in my world we call him the OG. John McCarthy,
And now Herb is unequivocally the top official, top referee in the world. But then there's, in boxing, you have a lot of good choices. There's a lot of good choices in boxing in California because of the volume that we have. And you have to look at different things like the sanctioning bodies have an interest. They like to put in names. And then, the promoters always have their input. And one thing that comes up, and this comes up more frequently than maybe it should, but this whole idea of social media and, social media with officials.
Yes. I'll be the first to say that the wife's always telling me, be careful, and you're held accountable, and I understand that. I'm obviously on social media, but I try to watch my P's and Q's, Well,
that's it. I'm not over here regulating free speech, but at the same thing, what I would suggest is to an official is just to be careful. Because I had a fight, and Robert Diaz, the former matchmaker for Golden Boy, brought to me one time. We had the referee was done, everything was done. he produces a picture from like 10 years ago that was on this referee's Facebook. Says, look, we can't. It was a picture of him with one of the fighters.
Oh, okay.
And so that disqualified So it's just that's one thing that I deal with is like the competing interest and trying to work with the officials, and then just the other headache in the job. It's not so much a headache, but just the making the system run with the California bureaucracy is a somewhat of a skill.
Yeah,
it takes skill to buy paper in California, in the state. You know, to go to get contracts for the things that we have, you have to go out to bid and you have to do all these things. The Department of Consumer Affairs is very helpful to the commission. We only have like 3 or 4 people in the office right now because COVID destroyed, hurt a lot of our numbers. And Consumer Affairs has been very helpful in facilitating that. And with their help, I'm able to manage, but it's still a process. And, writing regulations is a process, and that's
and mind you, fans, Mr. Foster, his was it your father, your grandfather were all involved in politics, right?
My uncle, uncles. My father did not. Was not interested in that. No.
But you know how to get laws passed, or you know how to get through is red tape a easy way of putting it?
I like to use that term when I'm dealing with the bureaucracy itself.
Yes.
With the legislature, I feel like the legislature is much more streamlined. That's been my experience, and the legislature is, I have experience with that piece of the business.
And as far as picking officials, I'll be the first to say, I mean, I love refereeing, but again, styles make fights as well as referees. And like one of our top officials is Jack Reese. I love this guy. He's our trainer. Now, mind you, Mr. Foster holds us accountable, guys. He just doesn't just throw out fights. Oh, you're next. Jack Reese he's like the John McCarthy of MMA, in my opinion. He's just an encyclopedia of rules, and he's held up to every fight. He's a great official. He's my mentor, and obviously a lot of the other officials. He's a mentor. He gives our training. Mr. Foster has them about every 6 months we have mandatory training.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll have another one coming up soon.
Yeah.
Actually working on getting that room lined up. Yeah.
So don't think that I mean, I want to get it to the fans, and don't think that Mr. Foster's just like, oh yeah, you have that fight. No. You know what? If you drop the ball in there, and let me quote you on that, he'll say, hey, we'll sit you down for a while, but you'll get back to work. And that's why, because remember, guys, Mr. Foster has these fighters' life in hand. It's not just like, hey, it's your turn, his turn, my turn. If he knows Jack Reese is going to do good in that one, or God willing, Ray Corona, which I've had some good fights, Tom Taylor, Rudy Barragan, that's who he's going to give it to. Because if anything goes down wrong, it's going to fall on him, as well as us, but he's going to be, talked to at first. So, there's a lot of pressure on him, guys. A lot of pressure. So, I want to ask you about this weight cutting. Mm-hmm. Yesterday we had a fight, and I think it was the Quiet Canyon. They canceled it. And Brian, our supervisor, said because of the weight cutting issue. Was it the weight cutting issue, the girl fight?
It was. Brian called me, and I killed the fight.
Can you explain more on what's the... Let me be honest, the way a fighter would say, what's the big deal?
Well, in this particular case, you had females, and the spread in California at that weight class, they were weighing in at, I believe it was 118. Mm-hmm. And Miss Cohen weighed in at was close to 118. I believe her opponent, I forget, like 114 or 113 and change. Something. They were close. I mean, it was fine. Mm-hmm. But the next,
and that's the day of the weigh-in, right?
That was the regular weigh-in day. Weigh-in. And they called me and they said they're 3.6 apart, and the book says 3, but I can give discretion. So I said, it's fine. 3.6 is fine. Okay, no problem. But what happened was the opponent we had one fighter gain to, I think, 129.
Wow.
Okay, and you had one fighter lose to 109.
Yeah.
So now you've got a 20-pound spread, and I think that's basically negligence if I'd let that go. And something that had happened. I mean, so I didn't think that was a good fight to regulate.
And mind you, fans, this goes to show how not only our state, but Mr. Foster, who's the big boss, who's the chingon, who's the metal, he cares about the fighters. He just doesn't say, hey, let's just make money. He cares about the fighters. And with that said, this is why he's so hard on this weight cutting. I have a son that's a professional fighter, and believe me, my wife's a registered nurse, and when he's cutting weight and I see that look in their face when their eyes are sucked back in the back of their head, my wife's on them. And this is what I wanted you to explain, Mr. Foster, is what is do you have data on that, or is just you don't like that, or how did you come about being so hard on that? And is California the only one on that?
Well, how this all happened, how this all happened, I mean, it was a long time ago, but I'll give the story. Because, I mean, I cut weight too.
Yes.
I mean, everybody cut weight that fight. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Okay, I really didn't, and whatever. And we had a commissioner on the neurologist or neurosurgeon, Dr. Lemons, Dr. Van Buren Lemons, and he had been on this for a while, talking about how bad this was. And I was listening, but I was like, oh, everybody does it, you know. And
part of the game, as they say. It
is. And we had a UFC up in Sacramento, and I think it was 177, but you could go back and look. Ray, it was the most bizarre day that I had. So Jeff Sherwood, you've heard of Sherdog, the Jeff Sherwood calls me, and the conversation goes something like this. I was at my desk because it was in Sacramento. I wasn't at the weigh-in because
you're so close.
Yeah, and the conversation went something like this: Andy, have you heard what happened to Cejudo? What do you mean, Jeff? I think he's off. I think he's weight cutting issues or whatever. So at that time, Cejudo wasn't like what he had became, and he was further down the card. Now, don't get me wrong, he's a good fighter. I'm just saying it wasn't like. So I hung up the phone, and 15 minutes later, Jeff Sherwood calls me back, and it was almost the same setup. Andy, have you heard? I was like, Jeff, you already called me about this. Yes, you told me about it already. No, hit him Barral. Weight cutting issue. That fight, he's in the hospital or whatever. Yeah. And so on a UFC, big one, numbered, a pay-per-view, for the first time in, I think, UFC history and what California, we have to issue up refunds because we've lost the main event.
Wow.
We've the advertised main event. We've lost 2 fights on the card due to weight cutting. And at that point, with all of California's medicals and all of our precautions and all of our things, I think this can happen here. And so, at that point, I come up with this idea, all these different things that I think can mitigate factors. Because you're not going to stop weight cutting. What you're going to do is you're going to be able to mitigate different pieces of it. And some of the things that I came up with worked better than others. I think licensing by weight class worked pretty well. I think that because we kind of know which weight class they should be fighting in. But regarding the data question, since that time, we have recorded thousands and thousands of bouts. We weigh them weigh-in, we weigh them the next day. And
the day of the fight.
The day of the fight. Yes. And we've sent that data to Harvard, and Harvard is doing lots of regression analysis and different things on that to try to, and then we've got all this C3 data, C3 Logics data, and we're trying to correlate that with our knockout data to see if there's a correlation between massive weight loss. And actually there's been a study, I think the Brazilian medical group came out with a study that took some of our data and basically made a finding that, you know, it wasn't a finding I'm hoping for, but basically cutting large amounts of weight does help you win when you gain it back. Like when you're bigger than the opponent, which makes sense. I mean, it's the reason you do it. But it would have been, you know, kind of hopeful that it would come back and say this doesn't do anything to help you. You know,
it didn't help the argument, the safety argument. No.
Right.
And with that said, I mean, all you guys that love, you know, have that personal love for your fighter, Mr. Foster's looking out for him. The state of California is looking out for him. And do the other states go by this as well, that you know of?
I mean, I think there's been some.
Because every state has pretty much their own rules, right?
Right.
By the commission, yeah.
I don't think the other states put as much emphasis on it as we do here. But at the same time, I have more exposure. The state of California has more exposure. We have more fights. We have more big fights. We have all these different things. I mean, so it's been my experience as I look at the data and I looked at the stuff, and this is a true statement. In general, this is kind of a blanket statement, so it's not necessarily true in every case. But in general, the more money that's involved in the fight, the more weight is being cut. That's in general.
Yeah, that can motivate my son. I know that. Hey, how much am I getting paid? Yeah, I see that. I see that. So, what do you do as your role in the boxing and MMA? What do you expect from the referees in the boxing and MMA?
Well, you know,
be nice, boss.
Yeah.
I say that kidding because, again, I mean, don't get it twisted, fans. Our relationship might be cordial. I see him cordial with all the officials, but Mr. Foster's laid down the law more than a couple times, and he holds us accountable. So if you guys think, oh, he's cool with that guy, cool with that, no, across the board he holds us accountable. So yeah, with that said, what do you expect from the officials, the referees from boxing and MMA?
Well, you know, I have the idea that
because you reffed as well.
I did referee. I refereed.
We can't say, well, Mr. Foster, you've never refereed for him. He's been there too.
And I've made my mistakes in there. I mean, I made some mistakes that I kind of, hopefully I've learned from and I can take to this. You know, I remember a couple of times I let fights go way too long. It's kind of like the Goldilocks formula for a referee, not too early, not too late. Yeah. But it's hard, and that takes skill and it takes experience.
Experience, yes.
Lots of experience to get that. And then on top of that is you've got to know who you're refereeing. That's why I send out the formulas that I send out every time before.
And excuse me, Mr. Foster, mind you guys, this is how much Mr. Foster holds us accountable. Before every fight, he sends us the stats on those two fighters, their knockout ratio, everything. So shame on us if we don't read it. Shame on us if we just like, well, I didn't know. No, he gives us all the tools to do the right thing in our toolbox. And again, with the training, and again, Jack, Tom, I've been official longer than Tom Taylor, but I still look to Tom to, hey, did I do anything right? Can I do something better? But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, it's just, you know, and the stats are not to influence you.
Yeah.
They're simply a tool in your toolbox.
Toolbox.
Because if I have approved the fight, it's a professional boxing match in the state of California or in MMA in that sense. So I want you to treat it as such.
Yes.
But even in that context, you don't treat a 12-round title fight the same as you treat a 4-round pro debut. Yes. They're different. You officiate them slightly differently.
Yes.
And I expect, like you've had Gallimore last night, okay?
Yes.
And you know, I thought that was an absolutely appropriate stoppage.
Thank you.
Because you're dealing with a man who had never been stopped before, okay? And had fought some of the best. I mean, just a who's who of you know,
tough cat,
very tough. And he had taken, by the time it got to the 6th round, because he had a great first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
And as he got to round 6, you know, he had taken a lot at that point. And he was taking, and what the biggest thing that I saw, and I'm sure was probably why you stopped it, was the offense from Gallimore had lessened considerably.
Yes.
You know, one of the tools that it's kind of a general statement that I make, but in California I like to sanction competitions, and not sanction beatings. Okay?
That's right. That's right.
And at some point during these fights, it ceases to be a competition and it becomes something else. At that point, that's when the referee needs to step in and stop this thing. And, you know, after, and again, you know, after Maxim, rest in peace, after that tragedy that happened, because how many times do we have Maxim? 10?
Yeah,
I think,
at least.
like that.
At least, jeez.
And it's somebody that we had all gotten to know. But after that, like after round 6 and 8, you guys are told the score.
Yes. I was going to bring that up. Last night it was a 10-rounder, and by the 5th round, our supervisor Brian goes, "You know, Ray, he's lost every round." And I'm like, "You're right, you know." And I was on top of it already, not necessarily the score, but like you could just see from the first, after the 2nd round, he was diminishing. He had a little spring still. He was still throwing punches back, but he was getting the worst of everything. But yet he was still throwing jabs. He was still moving it. But yeah, that's why I called the doctor. You know what, doc? Check him out, see what he did. But then the very next round, he just wasn't answering. He wasn't answering. He was taking a lot of headshots. But yeah, that was a hard one to stop for the simple fact he was still fighting. He was still in it. But why do I let him take a beating, you know? Like the boss says, we sanction fights, not ass whippings, you know?
So yeah, that's one thing that I expect from the referees. And sometimes, like, you know, the referees that have been in there themselves, I know you fought and Jack's fought, and there's several of you that have fought, and on the MMA side, Herb Dean, and certainly Frank Trigg, I mean, the UFC Hall of Famer. There becomes a time, and I think this is another skill that referees have to sort of learn. There comes a time when that fighter no longer wants to be there.
Yes,
Okay?
yes.
They'd rather be doing something else. But they're not going to quit because that's a dishonor. In MMA, you can just tap out. Nobody cares. I don't really get that kind of difference, because in boxing, if you quit...
Oh, yeah, you're crucified sometimes. Huh?
Yeah. But you look to the referee to pick up them cues, even when the trainer doesn't want to stop it.
That's a whole nother story there, yeah.
Yeah, or if the father's in the corner.
Yeah.
You know, that happens sometimes. But the referee needs to pick up on, when does this fighter no longer want to be here?
Yes.
And then get them out in an honorable fashion so they don't have, you know, they're not killed.
Yeah, yeah. And I even told the fighter last night, I go, you fought a good fight and you went out on your shield, you know? Because he didn't want to quit. He didn't want to quit. But I knew it was time, you know?
It was time.
Yeah. So you know what, Mr. Foster, I really want to, I got a lot of messages, emails about the pension.
Okay.
And real quick, guys, again, hats off to California, hats off to Mr. Foster. He's not only looking out for the fighters, but he's looking out for their future. And can you explain, and is it for the same as MMA, or is it the same with boxing? Does MMA don't have it yet? Does boxing have it? But can you explain on that?
California's the only state that has a boxer's pension fund. Now, it's not like life-changing money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's when you turn 50
Everything
years
counts,
old.
so.
Yeah, you might get a check for $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, something like that. Again, it's not some kind of life-changing money, but at the same time, nobody else is doing it, and it's a nice benefit that the state provides that takes no general fund taxpayer money.
Okay. There you go, guys.
And I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that is the commission here in California is not funded from the general fund. This is not taxpayer money that's coming from the general fund. The commission...
We generate our own, right?
That's correct, and that's how it functions. And when you hear that's the way that the commission operates, I think people have a lot better, they feel a lot better about the athletic commission and what we're doing out here, just because the industry
You're supporting
is
yourself pretty
much.
You know?
I mean, and so the MMA pension, the MMA fighters don't have it yet, although I'm working with Assemblymember Matt Haney's office and the commission, and I think in a couple weeks a bill is going to drop that will add mixed martial arts.
You MMA fans have been emailing me. You just heard it from the boss. You know, God willing, that's going to drop in a few weeks. And believe me, when Mr. Foster tells me you guys got it, I'll definitely email you guys back.
So I think since like 2012, the commission's given out 171 of the boxer pensions.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And how many rounds do you have to get that?
75 fought in California.
In California.
And for MMA, because it's 3s and 5s, but mostly 3s versus 4, 6, 8, 10s, and 12s, I'm looking at, we're looking somewhere between 36 and 40 rounds, somewhere 12, 13 fights, something like that here in California. Because it is a California fund.
Yes.
So we want it for California fighters.
Exactly.
You know? So.
And hopefully the other states will pick up on it too, you know. Hopefully when there's something good going on, it just snowballs to other states. Yeah. So Mr. Foster, my last question is, what do you see the future of CSAC California? And you know what? Let me go that step further. Are you going to stay with us? Are you going to plan to stay with us? Do you have any future? I hope not, because things are going good. You don't want to, how's they saying, if it ain't broken, don't fix it? And I don't see any brokenness, you know? We got a good crew, and this is coming from me. We got a good crew. We got the referees pretty much all support each other. That's judges, and we got a good crew. And I'm grateful for that, you know. But what are the plans for you? What are the plans for CSAC that you have as of today?
Well, Ray, it's an interesting question that you've asked. We've got a new commission.
Yes.
A lot of new members. Chairman Peter Villegas has recently been reappointed by the Speaker Rendon.
John was great.
And John Carvelli. And
great guy.
John Frierson hired me. And
Mr. Frierson passed, no?
He did, yes. And he's a great man, great man. And John Carvelli did a fantastic job. I talked to him. Peter Villegas has picked up, and he's done excellent. And you know, we've got a new commissioner. Commissioner Gurrell out of San Francisco has been very involved. He's very engaged. I very much enjoy.
And let me interrupt you. I don't know if it's you or they come to the fights, guys. They come to the fights. So again, when some of the fighters or the fans say, well, what do they know about boxing? They come to the fights, guys. When you see them ringside, that's our commission there. So go ahead, Mr. Foster.
Yeah, we have, and like, you know, we have a good group. Dr. Williams is a neurologist, and we have Commissioner Hendrickson, who has a background, a very deep background in the National Football League, and he's on the commission. And Commissioner Amarita Mars, I mean, she was the first judo world champion American to win.
Yeah, that's right. That's
famously Ronda Rousey's mother, but she's on the commission, and she has PhDs in lots of things, computer science, and she's a very smart individual. So
another educated badass.
So we just have a really good group on the commission to be able to tackle what we need to tackle, whether it be through the legislature, through legislative initiatives, or through promulgating rules through the regulatory process, or you know, and as you mentioned, they come to the fights. But what I would like to see happen with CSAC is 10 years ago, I was talking to John McCarthy, and I wanted to change the officials corps in mixed martial arts. I don't know if I use the word change, but add to it that many of the people that have came up with this sport now transition to being the ones that oversee it. Okay?
Is that a good thing? Or
I think that's a good thing. I mean, we've brought on Frank Trigg.
Yes.
We've brought on Chris Lieben. We've brought on these high-level jiu-jitsu practitioners that are now able to officiate, along with obviously Herb has been with us, and Herb's the top referee in the world. And I think that the MMA, I know I've got the data. MMA officiating has improved immensely in the last 10 years, just has. And I want to keep that trend going. And I also want to execute whatever the commissioners choose to be the next part of their strategic plan. One of the things is they want to push some of the California ideas, some of the ways we regulate, and see if we can get other states to be interested in the way
because it'll be safer all across the board, and it'll just make the sport that much better.
Yeah. So I've got 2 children here that they're both California born.
Yeah, California babies.
Yeah, they're California babies, and and I'll tell you, Ray, wasn't part of the question, but I just want to point out, all the stuff. I'm the guy that's being talked to and all that type of thing, but I can't do it without my wife. I mean, she's at home.
Yeah.
She does the things. She was a martial artist for a long time as well, and still does martial arts. She still trains. So it's not like I guess what I'm saying is a team effort.
Yeah, I mean I'm the same way with it. Without my wife backing me up, my backbone, it's just I can't even go to a fight if things ain't right at home.
That's
exactly,
right.
Exactly. And what do you hold in your future, boss? I mean, are you? I mean, is this you? As of today, it obviously is, but
yeah, I don't.
I hope you don't leave us.
Yeah, there's not very many jobs. I could probably count them on my one hand, maybe one finger. Whatever.
You're pretty much at the top of the game.
Yeah.
You are the top of the game. To be honest, in my opinion, because California has the most fights.
Yeah, and I like it. I like it. There's lots of issues all the time, but
I can imagine.
I like it. And so I'm not looking to make any kind of changes. But if something comes along, I'll obviously, and stuff does come along from time to time, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. And by the way, I think the state treats their employees very well in the state. That's my opinion.
Yes. And real quick, one of the this came from Mike Beltran, and I think we had talked about it. The Muhammad Ali license plate. What's that about? What are we working on there? What can we do as officials to support this dream? Can I call it this dream? That is it in the making, or?
Well, this is the Muhammad Ali stamp.
The stamp. Okay. That's even better.
It's the stamp. And, this is something that Chairman Villegas he's
I was just going to say, isn't he involved in that?
Yeah, he's on the board of the Ali Center, Muhammad Ali Center.
But real quick, weren't you doing a license plate as well?
Yeah, that's for a different thing. Mm-hmm. And the rules say that I'm not really supposed to talk about that until the license plate gets made. But in the future, I will be talking about that,
That's right.
But kind of the general idea, without telling everything about it, but kind of the general idea is in abstract, if we had a license plate of some kind, then revenue from that could potentially go to fund the pension programs that the commission has, which would further contribute to fighters' benefits. But
I'll definitely, God willing, that goes, I'll definitely push that as well.
Because one thing that I learned, Ray, from COVID is right now the way that the pension fund is financed right now is through ticket sales. Okay? Well, what happens when you have a year where you have no ticket sales?
Yeah, that was COVID, huh?
Yeah, or 2 years where you have very few ticket sales.
And mind you, the promoters were spending, and even the state was spending a lot of money putting us in those bubbles, huh?
That's correct.
A lot of money with no ticket sales, yeah.
And we did it a lot of times. How many times were you out there?
Yeah.
At the
a few times, a handful of times, yeah.
Yeah, was you ever at Golden Boy? Was that at Fantasy? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Golden Boy, and then I remember one time we were in Hollywood for 2 days. We had to stay in the room before the fight. Man, I thought I was in juvenile hall again, guys.
Yeah.
So real quick, again, the stamp, is that in the making or is it a done deal? The Muhammad Ali
I
stamp.
don't think it's a done deal. I think that they have to review it or whatever.
Okay.
But the chairman had worked with various legislators. I think Senator Padilla in Washington, different ones, and they submitted it. And it's my understanding that they're looking at it and reviewing it up on the United States Postal Service. But kind of the fact that Muhammad Ali doesn't have a stamp is, I mean,
shame on us.
Like,
I mean,
he should have. Anyway, but I guess better late than never. But
yeah,
I think he absolutely should have one.
yeah, he deserves it.
Yeah.
He's the icon of boxing.
He's probably the most famous athlete in the history of the world.
Yeah,
ever. Maybe the most famous person ever.
I met him in the De La Hoya Shane Mosley fight, and I'm a Christian, but as God is my witness, I felt like I met like a disciple or something, man. I mean, it was just so awesome to just shake it. And there was movie stars all over, and I just like, when I met him, it was like, I got a little teared up there, you know. It was crazy. And you know what? Even though he had, what was it, dementia or I don't know what it was, but he still said hello, and I did the undercard, and he's great work, and oh my God, it was crazy. It was crazy. But no, he definitely deserves it. Definitely deserves it. So, Mr. Foster, we're gonna close up. I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything you want to let the fans know, the state, anything?
I think we've covered a lot of different areas of the commission. I mean, I would let the fighters know that we might have drug testing's back.
That's right. That's right.
Don't be on stuff.
That's right. That's right. Hey, we're running a tight ship here, guys.
We just renewed our contract with the Salt Lake Medical Research and Testing Laboratory. Right. So, yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of drug testing.
Well, hey, I thank you again, Mr. Foster, for coming on. And again, anytime you want to say something to the fans or let the world know, please come on.
Well, thanks for having me, Ray. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Thank you.